Hey everyone, I'm Mary, your host and the CEO and co-founder of One Love Community Care and One Love Humanity. I'm the visionary behind FREEBIRD and Goddess Revolution. Our empowering platforms invite real people from all walks of life to share their voices, their hearts, and their stories with the world. On FREEBIRD, we delve deep into mental health challenges with compassion, understanding, and hope. Our episodes explore intimate topics such as neurodivergence, transgenerational trauma, relationship dynamics, life after abuse, and the journey of healing, recovery, and renewal. With a foundation in trauma-informed practice, cultural sensitivity, and holistic methodologies, I aim to bring a community of people together to empower the human spirit and provide a safe space for meaningful conversations and insights where we can integrate and embody our authentic selves. Join our community hub on FREEBIRD and let's navigate the path to discovering how to move from wounding to wisdom, from fear to faith, and transform your trauma into resilience and revolutionary change. You can reach us at www.olcc.au and let us know how we can support you. So, hey everybody, today we're actually honored to introduce one of my favorite people, beautiful Hanna. Hanna is a certified yoga teacher in multiple different styles. She's a trauma center.
I'm a trauma center. Yeah.
Hold up. In trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga.
Bit of a mouthful.
She's got a postgraduate in studies in psychology at the Australian Catholic University. I've personally known Hanna for a number of years, personally, professionally. We've journeyed together, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with her and to share this with the world. Hanna brings a unique perspective, drawing from her extensive experience in autism research. While she does not have a personal diagnosis of neurodivergence, she offers invaluable insights from her research and personal life, particularly her journey with CPTSD, which falls under the neurodivergence umbrella. And I'm so passionate about that area as well. And I've got so many questions for you around that, Hanna. Hanna's story delves into the intricate web of transgenerational trauma, revealing how past experiences shape our present and potentially shape our future as well.
Yeah.
She also navigates the complexities of relationships, intimate relationships, personal relationships, offering a very personal look at how mental health challenges intersect with our connection to others. Through her journey of healing and recovery, there's still more about you, Hanna.
Yeah.
Through her personal journey of healing and recovery, Hanna exemplifies resilience and the power of self-compassion. She shares her story to foster a sense of belonging and to help others who feel isolated in their experiences. She believes in her healing power and sharing this healing power vulnerably. And she hopes that I can't actually speak today, but I'm sure all of the listeners can feel me.
The energy.
They can feel the energy. They can feel the love.
Yeah.
She hopes that through sharing her vulnerabilities and her experiences, her knowledge and her wisdom, that other people will actually be a lot kinder to themselves on their journey and a lot more compassionate for themselves and for others on their journey as well. Join us today as we welcome Hanna. Hi, Hanna. I'm going to hand it to you for a few minutes before I start speaking again.
That was such a beautiful intro. Thank you so much. And I think, like what you were saying throughout that, for me and my own personal journey, is something that I really want to, I guess, inspire in others and, just promote is the power of self-compassion. That's been for me such a key part of my own journey, and I think it's really it's fundamental to healing the relationship with yourself, which then filters into like how you interact in other relationships as well, so there's just such beautiful medicine in compassion.
I love this whole, I think it was the Dalai Lama at one point that said compassion for others is useless if you do not have the ability to actually access your own like self-compassion. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, that's really big because we have a
Yeah.
tendency to like be so kind to others,
Yeah.
and yet that coming
Mhm.
back inside of ourselves and bringing that medicine can be a little bit more challenging. Why do you think that is? Or like, how have you
Yeah.
been able to navigate that?
Yeah, I think part of it is often if we've experienced trauma in like as children or developmental trauma or in our past, especially during those younger stages, there there usually wasn't a compassionate witness to our experience. So the people that were there at the time maybe were the perpetrators, or they weren't able to protect us or stand in properly.
Yeah.
And so we internalize shame when that happens. And then we also internalize a negative self concept that's based around that shame, which is sort of like the trauma personality is based around sense of innate shame, or there's something wrong with me, especially in developmental trauma and like complex PTSD, which is linked to developmental trauma. Um, because as you're developing, then your sense of identity, especially in those younger years, is like narcissistic, as in you think that it's about you. So
Mm,
it's easier to take on the shame, think that it's about you, and develop a negative self-concept,
right.
then create an opposition to your primary caregivers or whoever was doing the abuse, because that is more of a survival need to stay connected.
This is so interesting. So
Mm.
would you say, so this is kind of, I've got a couple of questions that are interlinked here. Would you say that narcissism is a way where when as children we haven't developed properly, or we created trauma, or there was like abuse there, so we blamed ourselves essentially for everything, so it become the world become based revolving around us. Is that what
Mm.
did I hear you correctly, or can
So
you?
it's more so I like it's interesting to think about narcissism as potentially people getting stuck in that stage of development.
Okay.
We as children we all go through a natural narcissistic phase where we haven't realized that people exist externally to us. You know, it's like everything is about us.
Give
But
me
if
an example, Hannah.
huh?
Give me an example.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like um
In a
say
relationship.
yeah, so say if you're like a little kid and your mum is saying to you, don't do that
Yes.
behavior. When you're in that narcissistic phase of development where your sense of self hasn't fully sort of like
Matured.
yeah, matured, then you'll internalize that as like I'm a bad person.
Or she's telling me what to do, or I'm a bad person. Because
Yeah, it's sort of like everything is referring to you rather than
right,
like
so
say a
instead of
behavior, or yeah,
so
it's like
instead of simply don't turn the light on after 6 o'clock, something like as simple as that, like creating a boundary or like something to regulate the household, the child might think, okay, I'm a really bad person. So it's got nothing to do with the instructions and everything to do with internalizing how wrong they are essentially, because they
yeah, and
is that it?
exactly.
Yeah,
And it depends also, I guess, on the relationship with the caregiver at that time too. So
sure.
that's something that needs to be thought of, and whether that child can get safe co-regulation with that parent or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually if that is there, which is not in complex PTSD and developmental trauma, the child can become upset, and then the parent can come in, soothe the child, be like, oh, you're feeling shame. You know, that's okay. It's not about you. I was just asking you to turn the light off. And then you don't get that
Yes,
negative self-concept
accused.
anchoring. Yeah. So the process of like developing an internal compassionate witness for yourself, which has been a really key part of my um healing journey, and something that I like to like share or offer to other people is like you're building almost like that co-regulatory or co-regulation compassionate adult that you didn't get.
I love it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. And I don't know, like, what I was taking care of a little girl actually not long ago,
Mm,
and she was throwing tantrums all over the place, and I just felt how much trauma she held, how much
mm,
shame she held. And I remember just saying, it's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel sad.
yeah.
It's okay to feel angry.
Yeah.
The moment I validated her experience and gave her permission, she just looked at me really stunned. And it was like, well, but what, where, and it's almost that safety creates that safety. The caregiver basically gives permission, and then
Totally.
the emotion is not, it's not shamed. It's not
Yeah.
shamed. It kind of begins to diffuse.
Yeah.
I remember feeling, wow, I'm at
Yeah.
the role of the caregiver and the parent
Mm.
in that compassionate space is so important.
Yeah, and I'm getting goosebumps as you're
Yeah,
talking about
so
that because
important.
the other thing that's really fundamental, I think, for children at that age as well is I guess like the caregiver is also in charge of helping to develop the emotional intelligence of the child. So when they're having this overwhelming feeling, the caregiver can be like, "It's okay, honey, that's sadness," or
Yes.
and so they can label what it
Beautiful.
is, and then they know also that it's okay, this is what this experience of
Ah,
sadness is. And it's not like later on if it's all a big mess and they don't know what it is and it's been shamed, so it's been sort of like repressed, and then when it does come up, it's overwhelming. And
mm.
yeah, so
It's incredible how like how much emotion is plays such a huge part of our lives,
mm,
in our relationships, within our own personal relationship, with our work,
totally.
but in our culture, we don't really speak about the
Mm,
significance of emotional intelligence and nonviolent communication and compassion and all of these aspects that really build on the humanness, but the maturity of the
yeah.
guardians that we essentially are. What are your thoughts? What advice would you have, Hannah? What advice would you give to people who are kind to others, but they find it really difficult to be kind to themselves
Mm,
when yeah, like what advice would you give,
mm,
especially if they're in situations where I wouldn't say that they're narcissistic, but they are givers. They've just been
yeah.
constantly giving in the role of giving, nurturing, loving, probably people pleasing. This is very common with
Mm,
women as well.
totally. Yeah.
And that when it comes to, assessing where they're at, they just can't give themselves that.
Mm,
Or they
yeah.
struggle. I shouldn't say they can't, but they struggle.
Yeah, yeah, it's so common with women as well, isn't it? That overgiving and even like martyrdom sort of experience. I One of the things that I would suggest is finding someone that you could co-regulate with.
Beautiful.
I think that's really important. Someone
Amazing.
who sees your worth, even if like that means going to see a professional.
Sure.
Um, if you don't have anyone that comes to mind
Yep.
in your current experience, just so that because often when we're trying to be kind to ourselves and we haven't had it modeled to us, it's difficult to try and bring our nervous system back into safety just purely by itself, which is
Yep.
where you have that social engagement system, like the social engagement part of the nervous system, which you can apply to yourself as well for that self relationship. So it's almost like when you have someone else there that is regulated in their system and present, then your nervous system actually
Oh,
entrains to that, which is amazing. Like when I heard about that, I was like, this is so cool. So I geeked out on it a lot, but it basically means the thing that I was reading about it, I think in the polyvagal theory.
yeah, that's where I learned about it.
Yeah.
Neurobiology. I'm in love with neurobiology. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, basically the most regulated nervous system in the room, others will entrain to that one. So coming back to what we were talking about with the child and the parent too,
Yeah.
say the child's very dysregulated, but the parent is able to hold their window of tolerance in their center, then the child will, their nervous system will like entrain to that and be like, okay, it's safe, you know? Yeah.
I am so mesmerized by this whole um, polyvagal
Yeah.
neurobiology.
So cool.
Like it's almost that it's beyond, I don't know, is it beyond the mind, or is it just
Mm,
like energy, or is it that, is it that we pick up on what how would you explain that? Because
mm.
I got taught this by a neurobiologist in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I obviously it's probably a lifetime of learning
I'd say
to
so as
grasp it.
well.
But what I remember she said is the most important thing to be
Mm,
when someone is in crisis, or someone is in trauma, or someone is completely emotionally dysregulated, is to bring yourself to a regulated state. And
mhm.
just, if they're willing, just hold their hand and sit with them, just feeling
Yeah.
so centered. And
Totally.
eventually they're going to
Mm,
self-regulate. And I just
mm.
like, because I've had so many experiences where this has happened with others. I just walk into a room and all of a
Yeah.
sudden the calmness comes through.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally.
do you know how to explain that, or can you describe that
What
better
the
for me?
word I think that, yeah, that's great. I think the author Deb Dana talks about it. She's got some books on the polyvagal theory. And I think the term that she uses is neuroception. So
Okay.
it's actually under the, I think, conscious and it's like part of the unconscious mind
Right. Yes.
operating system, right?
Sure.
But she calls it neuroception because it's almost like that's the initial spark, and then later on our conscious mind sort of catches up with it. So it is operating like underneath our usual awareness. And it's, yeah, obviously tied in. Yeah.
I was going to say, is
Yeah.
it that the brain is trying to reorganize itself the whole time in order for it to catch something where it can believe that it can heal or restore? There's a like it can
Mm.
re
Yeah, like find homeostasis again.
yeah, yeah.
Ideally, what it my understanding with the nervous system studies that I've done is that obviously your nervous system is meant to be flexible, so you'll go through periods of activation and stress, but then ideally you come back into the social engagement system, which is that regulation. But yeah, people who have experienced trauma and that sort of thing they're either stuck in hyper activation,
Yep.
and they will often go from periods of hyper activation to hypo, so they
Go
crash right
down.
down again, and they very rarely spend time in that window of tolerance or in that social engagement system. So it's sort of like teaching the body that it's safe again to be in that space of social engagement.
Can you explain to all of us what your understanding of social engagement is? Is it
Yeah.
out there and having social engagements with other people, or is it just our internal social
Yeah.
engagement
Yeah,
practice?
yeah. So it's like that's what they call the ventral vagal part of the dorsal what's the word? So many blah 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 of the nervous system. So ventral vagal is when you're in social engagement, which is when you're in that homeostasis and you feel connected as
You're
well. That's the
balanced. You're
key. Yeah.
balanced, essentially. Yes.
Yeah, and you feel connected to self and to other. But
Hmm.
it's really interesting with the ventral vagal or social engagement system is that you can have blended states. So you can have social engagement, which is like calmness in the window of tolerance with a bit of activation, and that becomes play.
Got you. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when it's a bit of the dorsal vagal, which is the shutdown, it becomes sort of like,
Yeah.
sitting with someone in stillness and you don't have to talk, but you're just, very calm together and that sort of thing. So that's social engagement with a bit of like down regulation. So I thought that was really cool because, yeah, these blended states are also part of being in that window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
We totally nerd out on this, you and I, for
Yeah.
hours. So tell me,
So,
like, and we have had some conversations about this, but not in detail. When
mm,
somebody is in a heightened space of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder,
mm,
um, what happens, do you know, like to the chemicals in the brain, or like is it that the brain is now completely in survival, like fight, flight, fawn,
mhm,
fear? And what advice do you have
mm.
for people who are in that space of PTSD? Like, what would be the first phase of healing or understanding or recovery?
Sure. Yeah, my understanding is when people are experiencing that level of activation with PTSD, they're in a version of a flashback to
Sure.
the trauma response. What happens when that is going on is that the like prefrontal frontal cortex and the usual like conscious part of the brain goes offline and you're activated through the limbic system or the
Fight, fight,
Right,
flight.
that
Yeah, you
one.
and I can just, people
Yeah,
can feel us today.
totally. And so their body is responding to the present environment as if they're in the same
In the
experience
past.
from the past.
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to bring in with this is also coming back to that self-compassion thing, where say if you're having an emotional flashback or some sort of intense activation like that, this becomes easier with practice as well, with something else, another technique that I'll speak about in a second. But if you can catch yourself when you're very heightened like that, and you can still have a bit of that prefrontal cortex online,
Sure.
one of the things that you can do for yourself is to like put your hands on your heart or on you and have, first of all, the self-compassion is recognizing that your system is trying to respond to a perceived threat. So it's actually operating
To
in
try
a
and
way.
keep you alive.
Yeah, exactly. It's very intelligent, is trying to keep you alive. So rather than like being in that, like, oh, there's something wrong with me mentality,
Sure.
it's like my system is perceiving a threat. It might be below my conscious awareness because that can happen a lot with trauma too. It might be a scent or something that sets you off.
A
Um,
sense or a sound or even lighting, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But one of the things you can do is start to track your activation of your system from day to day. So notice when you're feeling particularly stressed out or activated in your system. And yeah, if you're in that moment, you can say to yourself, like, I'm experiencing the living reality of what happened to me.
Beautiful.
And it helps you realize that what you're going through, it brings you into the present moment.
Sure.
And it also acknowledges the part of you that experienced that trauma, which maybe didn't get that acknowledgement at the time. And that's why it's trying to come back around and
Yeah.
complete.
In order to repair,
Yeah.
it must be validated and acknowledged, right?
Yeah.
Rather than denied, suppressed, or repressed. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So that one's really powerful. And the other thing I would say is working to build somatic resource in your body. So to start to feel safe in your body, and it can be helpful to work with, like, say, a nervous system practitioner or something like that. For me, trauma-informed yoga was a real key aspect for this for myself, because for a lot of trauma survivors, the body is a scary place to be in because that's where all of that
Sure.
energy and emotion is stored. So it can be easier to sort of exist up here in very fragmented parts. But one of the things that you can do is start to build a resource where you expand your capacity to be in your body and to feel safe,
Mhm.
which helps you, yeah, sort of have a ground that you can return to, like with the nervous system, where you have that ventral vagal, where it's like you activate it and then you come back to the social engagement and
Sure.
balance. You can start to build over time, and it takes time and practice, but you're building a relationship with yourself.
Love
And
that.
yeah, you're worth putting that energy in.
Love that.
Yeah, and then your body and can be that ground that you return to.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when you're feeling, especially in a flashback, if you're feeling very overwhelmed, the senses can be a really great way to bring yourself back into the present moment and also ground like into resource if the body is feeling too overwhelming. So you can notice things in the environment, like looking around with your head and your eyes also activates the vagus nerve, which is that part of us that activates fight, flight, freeze, or the safety. So looking around with your eyes, looking at like things in the environment, especially that draw you in because you like the look of them, can be really good. Because the other thing, I'm ranting so much, but
No, I love it. I'm just like, I'm taking all this in and I'm going to increase this podcast, I think.
yeah. The other thing that can be that I think is really important with that is that trauma survivors can often struggle to see the things that are good around them because their system has been so geared to recognize threat alone.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are able to tune into your senses and like just allow your eyes to land on like a color in the environment that you really like, and rather than skim over it, just like stay with it for a moment and really allow yourself to like absorb what it is about that color or that object or that plant or whatever that you like. So you can explore what it's like to take a little bit of goodness in to your experience.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
yeah. So yeah, those are the
And,
sort
and
of
it's the senses though, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
the smell, the
yeah,
touch, the sight, the
yeah.
taste. It's like coming back
Hearing.
to your
Hmm.
body, the hearing. Hannah,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you because I
Mm.
feel like this is really important, not only for people who are experiencing traumatic events or in crisis or, experiencing mental health challenges or disabilities, but what advice would you have for caregivers and guardians, parents, friends, lovers, partners
Mm.
when when they witness, for example, somebody that they love who is in a traumatic
Mm.
experience? What are some of the things that you would say? What can you give advice to support? And
Yeah.
then, because a lot of times what I've seen is sometimes they don't know what to do and they shut them down. Like,
Yeah.
a partner might say, that's okay, it's not really there, get over it. Or you're
Mm.
over exaggerating, you're being too emotional, or,
Mm.
like you're high in your law. And like all of these, I guess, all of these things add to the trauma and actually increase the shame, and
Yeah.
also segregate, ostracize, and separate the person feeling
Mm.
more like alone in the world instead of
Mm.
actually being around which is what you were saying, someone who's regulated where they can finally feel safe and
Yeah.
validated and accepted. So, what advice would you have to, partners and family, friends?
Mm. I think it like educating yourself on trauma and what is actually happening for the person is like really key because like you said, if that understanding isn't there, it can seem like, oh, they're overreacting. Like I can't see what they're reacting to in the environment. Like that doesn't make sense.
I
um,
laugh, but
yeah,
it's deeper than that. We're just bringing a little bit of light to something quite heavy.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally. And yeah, like you said, it brings that shame in
sure.
for the person experiencing it. So I think that's really important. And I do think like there has been a lot more talk about the impacts of trauma and things that's coming out in our society slowly but surely, like
Absolutely.
into the common thought of, just everyday people. So I think that's good. But yeah, specifically understanding about what's going on for their system, I think would be really important. So that educational aspect. I think making sure that they have support themselves
Yeah,
as carers or,
beautiful.
partners. I think that's so essential because yeah, like say they might even have some trauma in their history, and then you get that situation where,
It's
yeah, they're both going off at the
traumatic
same
experiences,
time.
essentially.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you can get re-traumatization because you're both triggering each other.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, really having your own sense of your own support, whether that be professional or peer group things, or, you know, whatever fits for you. I think that would be really important. And then coming back to what you were saying about like remaining in your window of tolerance. So understanding your own nervous system, what sets you off, and having some things that you can use, whether it's telling yourself when they're having a reaction that it's not about you, or that, you know, even like the practice that I gave before, where it's like, okay, they're reliving the truth of their past experience in
Sure.
this moment. So you have an awareness of it as well.
It's really
Um,
a wise way to look at it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. It's definitely helped me. I feel like that's a really good tool to have.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then using things like the breath as well. That can be because the breath is connected to the autonomic nervous system, so it's unconscious most of the time, but we can bring conscious awareness to it, which means we can downregulate our system if we're too activated. So like deep belly breaths, even like oh, what's his name? Oh, I'm having a mental blank, but the
Oh, the hot, not the guy that's really famous for the big, deep. Those,
oh yeah, not him, the Iceman.
I see.
That was a bit too activating
That
for
was
me.
not a real perfect like exploration of how he does his breath work, but it's not him, is
Yeah,
it?
no, no, this is much more chill. And not chill in the cold, but like
Much more relaxed.
yeah. Peter Levine, that's who I was thinking of. He created somatic experiencing, which is a somatic sort of psychology intervention. But he suggests using the VU breath, where you breathe in and then you go
I like
VU
that.
like that, and really feel it in your belly.
Yeah.
And that can be really calming for your system. So having, I think it's really like knowing your system, not judging it, and having support,
Yeah.
education, and having some tools that you can use, like that sense orientation, the breath, that sort of thing, that you can work with your system when you're out of your window of tolerance and you want to come back in. Yeah.
And I've got to say, I feel like for me, one of the most effective, peaceful ways to come
Mm,
back into my center in all of the different practices and modalities that I have been a
mm,
part of has been the breath. And
yeah. Yeah.
I've almost visualized and utilized my breath to be almost like the inner warrior. And so where
Mm,
there's conflict,
goosebumps.
where there's arguments, where
Mm,
there's struggle, where there's challenge, where there's laughter and celebration, even I'm just like, like
yeah.
just really working with my breath and then just to kind of self
Yeah.
soothe almost, and just ground.
Right. Mm,
So I feel like the breath is really important. And I guess the other thing you mentioned, which I'm realizing more and more the importance and significance, is being around people who are self-regulated, who are aware of trauma, whether that be a coach or a counselor. It also is
yeah.
very, very important to have those types of people in your field,
Totally.
your
Because
community.
yeah, yeah, it's really fundamental. And like if your environment, if you're trying to do this work by yourself, but
Yeah.
you're in an environment 24/7 that
Yeah.
is completely chaotic and unsafe for you, your system is not going to switch into safety because
No,
it's picking up threats everywhere. So
absolutely.
yeah, those external resources and community are really, really fundamental for supporting and healing together and growing together and understanding about this together, so that we can, help ourselves and help each other and be the best versions that of ourselves that we can be for the world and what we want to do. Yeah.
I know you're passionate about this. I'm so passionate about this, and I'm
Mm,
excited to, yeah, create this in the ripples of community intervention and trauma-informed practice and holistic therapies
totally.
and all of these beautiful self-awareness practices and very gentle practices
Mm,
and
mhm.
very practical practices such as self self-compassion, bringing that
Yeah.
back into focus and,
Mm.
for us to realize the importance of that in our lives. So, Hannah, I do
Mm.
have another question for you.
Yep.
Relationships can be
Yeah.
really sticky.
Yeah.
They can be really sticky. They can be incredibly activating, complex. We're essentially like even into, I'll talk about specifically intimate relationships because we have
Sure. Yeah.
different frameworks, different backgrounds, different experiences, all of these
Mm.
things, relationships, cultures. How have you navigated these intricacies and complexities and different,
Mm.
cultures
Mm.
in your own within your own personal relationship?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
So
personal question. So.
interesting because yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I found it's interesting. Relationships are such mirrors, right? And I found that my relationships shifted as I continued to do personal healing work with myself.
Love it.
And yeah, one of the things that I really had to navigate through that was oh, what was I going to say? Recognizing who is a safe person or the right person to be with. So I guess like overcoming the trauma bond
Okay.
pattern.
Talk to me about the trauma bond pattern.
Yeah.
Then we'll go back to the complexity.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, my experience with this was that I was emotionally shut down,
Sure.
um, due to previous trauma, not knowing how to process those emotions. And so that was the part that I guess I was bringing into the situation because I wasn't fully in touch with myself.
Okay.
And so I was, as I was saying, relationships and mirrors, attracting emotionally unavailable partners.
Okay.
Right?
Let me
So
try and get this. Hold on. Let me just understand. So
yeah.
you were shut down.
Mm.
So because you were shut down, or were you shut down emotionally?
Yes. Yeah. So
In the
like
sense of not being able to what? Like
trust opening up to someone
having
without
like a deep conversation or sharing vulnerably. Is that what you're saying?
not so much with friendships, it was more so with intimate relationships.
That's what I'm talking
And yeah, it's interesting actually, just as a quick tangent with that, in yoga, they relate the sacral chakra, which is where the sexual energy in that is, to the subconscious mind. So, because there is, in trauma research and understanding as well, it's those intimate relationships that bring up that initial wounding with caregivers and things because they are so close.
Of
But
course.
yeah, in the yoga philosophy too that I've studied is interesting because they say only when that sexual energy is sort of ignited in that intimate relationship through that sacral chakra does the subconscious mind material come up to be healed and
Hmm.
processed.
So would
Anyway,
that say, would you neither
yeah,
we're going to speak different languages
I
today,
know.
but I'm sure you guys know what we're saying.
Yeah.
So would you say that the being shut down emotionally would also
Mm,
be equivalent to being shut down sexually? Because I know a lot of people who are so open sexually, so
yeah.
open, but
Yeah.
yet emotionally and vulnerably, they're just completely shut off.
Mm, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like how, like, I mean, obviously it's probably a bigger conversation, but
Mm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because yeah, I can relate to having experienced that. It almost felt, now that I reflect on it, almost like I was more comfortable being in sort of a masculine form of relating,
yeah.
an immature masculine form of relating, than actually surrendering into my feminine and
Hmm.
allowing myself to be held and supported by a
Okay.
man.
Okay. And
Mm,
and then you were attracting people who weren't able to meet you because they were
no,
emotionally unavailable because the
exactly.
mirror thing that you're
Yeah.
saying, that
Yeah.
that the whole the so you had to essentially grow and be
Yes.
brave enough to, expand,
Mm,
dig up whatever. Is that what you're saying in order for you to,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah. 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 And I think the vulnerability thing too was a big one for me. And that was also, I think, based on having that core identity of shame from my trauma, where it's like, okay, I'll let you in, but I'm not going to let you into this bit because it's so
Right.
broken and messed up in there. If you actually see it, you're just going to leave anyway. You know, those sort of beliefs that we have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah. And then I got to a stage where I'm like, I am done with relating in this way, but I like don't know how to, I don't know, bring in the right person. It was almost like, yeah, so I had a fair amount of time where I was just by myself
Yeah,
too.
which I
I
think
think
is
that was
great.
really necessary. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's an
So,
interesting,
so you
yeah.
moved through that trauma bond. Can you safely say, can you give
Mm,
us some feedback for
mm,
those of us that are in a place of wanting to, go deeper, but afraid because of the trauma
mm,
history? And, I also want to just add to that.
mm.
I do feel it's important for for people who have been traumatized or abused or have had situations in the past that haven't been not nurturing and
Yeah.
loving and safe. It is really important that you are discerning, and it is
Yes,
important that you are careful. Obviously, we're not saying go off and like open your heart, just be,
totally.
but it is a process, isn't it? And it's
Mhm.
it's one that takes time and
Yeah.
one that requires a lot of tenderness, patience, and I guess that compassion, where
Mm,
it's authentically able to sit in safety so that it can
mm.
present and recognize that safety in others as well. Because
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people who don't even recognize that
That
safety.
was me. That was me.
But
It was
really,
like my radar was way off.
wow.
Yeah.
It's
So
got
for me, the
goosebumps.
self-compassion and building the safety in my own body allowed me to, like I said before, have that ground of safety, start to experience that ground of safety within myself. And through beautiful experiences with like my yoga family and things like that, where, I felt really loved and seen. So that's that importance of having that community and support as well. Um, but yeah, I think I definitely didn't have that for a long time when I was younger. And so the other thing that's important, I think, with some of this is to, like if our trauma occurred in relationship, then it needs to heal in
Well,
relationship.
that's powerful.
Yeah, whether that
So
means,
powerful.
yeah, so what
Can you
I
say that
found,
again?
yeah,
That's a drum roll moment that I
yes.
didn't come from.
If the trauma occurred in relationship, then it needs to heal in relationship. And I found that on my personal journey too, where I was doing a lot of this internal work and, somatic based stuff. But when I met my current partner, who we've been together for 3 years, and it's a very secure, it's what I would say my first secure, proper relationship. Yeah, we love each other. It's
I know
great.
you
But
guys are absolutely gorgeous. I've seen you together once, and it was just like, oh,
yeah,
nice.
yeah, so grateful for him. But yeah, all of my unaware trauma responses came up in that initial
Yeah,
6 months. And luckily I had done enough personal work at the time that I could explain that to him. So
beautiful.
I was like, look, I have this trauma response where like if I stay at your place the next morning, everything in my body tells me to run. And he's like, okay. And he was non-judgmental. He was really compassionate, understanding. And yeah, I remember this moment very clearly where one morning he was like, hey, the invitation is there if you want to maybe lean in to feeling that whilst I'm here with you. And he's like, no pressure if you need to go. And I was like, you know what? I think I will. I'll stay. And then I had all of this terror come up in my body and I was bawling my eyes out for like 30
Horrible.
minutes. Yeah. And then after that, I was fine. I could stay. I didn't have that trauma response come up anymore. So this is sort of like that, the things that occur in relationship when they're able to heal in, a secure relationship like that was, Yeah,
That's magic.
very. And I
Yeah.
didn't expect that stuff to come up either. So this is, yeah, another thing that can happen. It's like, yeah, layers of it or different.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I thought I was all good by myself. And then,
Sure. Well, maybe you just need to kind of work through this one, or but
yeah, yeah,
how
exactly.
gorgeous though that
Mm,
because as you're saying, you were vulnerable enough to be honest with him, and when I asked you the question earlier, what advice would you give caregivers or
mm,
parents, lovers, partners for when someone's going through trauma?
mm,
I have had to educate some of my nearest and dearest. And when
mm.
I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like quite heightened or like afraid or
Yeah.
unsafe, and they try and be positive or kind of try and
Mm,
tell me, like, try and intellectualize it
mm,
or go into philosophy, I'm like, hey, what I need right now is
mm.
this because I'm experiencing this. So I'm having to like literally
Yeah.
draw on my own inner resource and actually be honest so that they know what's going on for me.
Yeah.
And I love that you were able to do that with
Mm.
him and he was able to go, hey, there's no pressure. But if you
Yeah.
want to explore it, you can.
Yeah, which was huge. It's like the option to lean into it if you feel like you might like to explore what it's like to not play that pattern out, you know?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Mm, mm.
And we did I hear correctly at the beginning when you said you had the CPTSD, Hannah?
Yeah, yeah. I do recognize that that's sort of like a thing that I resonate with as far as like I don't want to say like a diagnosis, but something that I've lived through.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, so like complex PTSD, it's not actually recognized in the DSM, which is the big book of what's legitimate or not in psychology. Um,
Book that needs to be fully renewed.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It needs a revamp.
Yeah.
So last season, no.
We won't go there.
Um,
We'll be fine.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so PTSD is recognized in the DSM, but complex PTSD isn't. And complex PTSD is often like the stuff I've spoken about today, which is developmental. So when you're younger, it's chronic, it's usually related to relational wounds that have occurred over time, whether that be abuse, neglect, even just like lack of attunement to your needs as a
Yeah.
child and things. All of that sort of comes under the umbrella of CPTSD.
And it can, I
And
guess, could it
yeah,
also be things like religion, culture, it can
totally.
be intersectional as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
systemic
System.
trauma,
Yeah.
yeah, cultural
Yeah. All of
oppression
that. Yeah.
comes into that as well. So for sure. And the reason why it comes under the umbrella of neurodivergence is that if you're a child and you're growing up in that sort of environment, your system sort of gets wired differently. So you might have more of a hyper responsive nervous system, or you might be more likely to be stuck in fight, flight, or something like that. So um, yeah, that's my understanding of why it fits
Hmm.
into the
Hmm.
neurodivergence. It's like, yeah, the wiring in your development happens differently. Mm.
How has this shaped your perspective on your healing journey and
Mm.
your decision to even explore psychology and healing others and
Mm.
others like
Mm. Yeah, well, it's a big question.
yeah,
I
I
feel
know.
like,
Break it down.
yeah, yeah. I think, like that actually, I'm going to go maybe briefly into astrology quickly because there's a character in astrology called Chiron, which is the wounded
I know.
healer
Yeah, yeah,
archetype.
yeah. We all know. Well,
Yeah,
all know Chiron.
that old guy. So,
Oh, dude.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
spirit for a whole bunch of us healers.
Totally. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's intertwined with the own personal healing journey as a way to try and understand and make sense of what you're experiencing. And then as you sort of develop along that path, for me, it was natural. Like I have a very keen sense of like curiosity, like what we were talking about with the nervous system stuff before. I'm like, whoa, I want to figure out like what is going on here. I'm just like insatiable trying to like get all the pieces together. And yeah, for me that made sense also as I sort of came along my path and found things that helped me to be like, I want to share this with others, whether it be through like the trauma-informed yoga work or even this podcast and things like these are the tools, like these are the things that have assisted me. Like, please explore what ones work for you and, find a way to, yeah, I guess like empower your own healing journey, because I think that's really important as well. And then, yeah, the psych stuff was, I wanted to be a psychologist when I was a teenager because I was like, what is going on
Well,
with humans?
I love it.
But yeah, I
Have you
didn't know.
figured it out? Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's a beautiful mystery. We
Of
get bits and
course.
pieces,
Of course.
but yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Mm,
complex, ugly, magical
all of
mystery.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My final question is, what has been your saving grace in this journey so far, thus far for you, in
Mm,
your own personal revelation, and in your experience in taking in that beautiful mystery that we were talking about, that beautiful complex mystery? What has been your number one, like the biggest thing that has shaped you, your saving grace? That is a
mm.
very big question.
It
So
is.
yeah, and it can be maybe one or two things, but like, because I know, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop talking and give it to you.
Love you.
I
Yeah,
love you.
so big. I think for me, like I said, the yoga and embodiment stuff has been huge. From when I was younger and I came across it, it was just something resonated for me where I was like, this is really helping. But the other thing that came to mind, and I was actually reflecting on this the other day, was the power of nature.
Ah, yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, because like as a nervous system regulation resource, the natural world is incredible. The ocean for me was always a place I would go to. Yeah, it's just, it would instantly bring me back to myself. I remember driving out there when I was younger and processing a lot of stuff and driving out to a headland at night and just having the expanse of the stars and the ocean and being like, there's all this shit that's going on in my life, but there's this immensity.
Vast.
Yeah, and it's just beautiful. And I felt like I was part of it as well, being there to witness it. So Mama Nature definitely needs an honorable mention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like nature is medicine, and Mother Nature, essentially she homes us, right? And
Yeah.
all it just, she really does put everything into perspective. I love what you've just said. For me,
Mm.
what I hear is your connection is ignited, and
Yeah,
by nature,
totally.
nature ignites your connection to yourself. And I feel like connection, that is so, so beautiful. And I give reverence to Mother Nature as well. And we could probably speak about that a whole episode about how
Yeah,
she owns us. So we don't need to
totally.
fight each other and like war and
Yeah,
these borders and things. Like we can just
totally.
um
Mm.
so is there anything else that you would like to personally share? I also just want to mention Hannah does do work with participants within the NDIS
Yes,
framework,
yes,
and you run workshops, and hopefully you and I are going to collaborate.
yeah,
We are in partnership, if you like. We are in
yeah,
community. We're in community
yeah,
co-creation.
yeah, totally.
For the One Love Community Care world as well. And I'm actually would love to do a series of talks with you, because I feel like this was really a
Yeah,
lot of fun. This was a
I
lot of
feel like
fun,
there's
very natural.
themes that we can just geek out on and go into, and yeah, definitely, that'd be amazing.
Would you
So
like
much
to
fun.
share anything else with anybody that's listening as a final?
Mm.
I want to go into French, but I can't even speak English. So final,
Powwow.
final farewell.
Yeah. Um, man, just love and gratitude for each person that might be tuning in, and your own unique journey and what you bring to this life and to your community and your families and your story and your resilience and the resilience that people might not even know about every day. That, yeah, that's what I'd like to
Yeah,
acknowledge
I
and
love that. Thank you,
bring
Hannah.
gratitude
Yeah, I
to.
feel like that beautiful knowing your resilience and knowing your strengths and really
Mm,
drawing from that well and that currency and
yeah.
allowing yourself to deeply appreciate yourself and the community. Beautiful. I love that message. I'm going to
Mm.
receive that message from you. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank
Gosh,
you for everybody
it's
tuning
a
in. If you
pleasure.
would like to hear more from Hannah and would love for her to jump back on, and if you've got any questions, please email us at support at olcc.au or just send us just message us through any of the socials. We love you, Hannah. We love
Thanks
everybody.
so
We'll see you all
much.
soon. Good night. Mwah, mwah,
Thanks,
mwah.
Connie.